ready, at least, or close to being ready to make the step forward. We ended up going back to Sweden, and then we all thought, well, he's definitely going to be a guy that gets some time right at the beginning of the season, and it didn't happen. And then we saw other guys get called up, and Magna and Walensky and Pettersson, and we're all sitting here like, well, what's the issue then? He's not having a bad season, and then he's just not getting a call up. So that's the thing that concerns me a bit, is we just don't know what's wrong, and there must be some reason they're not calling him up, whether they just want him to get more seasoning down in the AHL. That would be the thing I guess we would all hope for, is that it's not some other issue that they're worried about. But he's still a guy that has a lot of promise. If I'm looking at the Ducks defensemen that they have coming up, I feel like he's the most likely guy to make the jump up and probably have a more successful career than other guys. Josh Maher, I think, is right behind him. But there's still more to come from Jacob Larson, and I would love to see him get a start on the Ducks roster out of training camp, because I think he deserves it. It would be great to see him fill in a bottom pairing role and really thrive.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we were all waiting for, man. We'll see if that happens, like you were saying, at training camp, if he's going to be able to at least make the opening roster and play a few games just to kind of test and see what's going on, because, the Ducks have a hole there on defense or two. We'll see what happens, but going to be interesting to see what they do with him. Let's shift gears a little bit and go over to our forward section. Well, again, we'll start off with some of the lesser-known guys in the system, but let's go ahead and top it off with Tyler Toit. I've heard of him before, mostly because of you, because you were so deep in these prospects compared to me. But it was interesting reading through these guys and just finding out who's actually in the system. You're kind of like just really enlightening. Really like, oh, okay, that's where that guy's at. He had an outstanding year last year, Eddie, with the Victoria Royals and the WHL. 92 points. Where is this guy? We need offense. Is this something that the Ducks should be looking at in the future to see if he's going to be able to make it up to the show? I mean, he's 21 years old. We haven't really heard a lot of him with the goals. He had a little bit of a stint there. But what do we got? What do we got here with Tyler Toit?
Yeah, I don't want to put a damper on his season because it was a great season. 92 points in 66 games is great no matter what. But you see this a lot from overage players. In the Canadian Hockey League, whether it be the OHL, the QMJHL, or the WHL, where they tend to put up a lot of points, and there are guys who are in the NHL who've done that. Joseph Landisi, who's in the Ducks system, was a guy who put up a ton of points for Barrie in his overage season because they were very good. He played with Kevin LeBanc, who also put up over 100 points in his overage OHL season. You see it often, and it doesn't. It looks great, and you're like, oh God, this guy's put up 92 points in junior. He's going to come up and he's going to light it up in the AHL, and he's going to be a guy that's going to do well in the NHL. And that's it's not necessarily true. And I don't want to harp on him because he had a great season. It's just usually you want to see this from a guy earlier on, and then you can see it's kind of similar to transitions there. And he's been good with Victoria pretty much all 5 years that he's been there. And you've seen continued progression throughout, so that's always a good thing. It's just I don't know where he's going to go from here. I need to see more of him. I think in with San Diego, he only played 2 games with there in 2016-17. Didn't pick up any points, but it's a small sample size in 2 games. So I'm really interested to see if he does get a shot with San Diego this year. I think that will give me a better idea of what the type of player he is, because he is a guy who can put up points. Like you said, the Ducks need guys who can put up points. He is a goal scorer, and he is a guy who has some adept passing skills as well. But it's a 7th round pick, so it's a toss-up, really, and what you're going to see. It really all comes down to, can he transition that success he's had in the WHL with Victoria into San Diego, and then we'll get a better idea of if that's going to really if he's able to make the jump up to the Ducks eventually.
Let's talk about Kyle Olson, somebody who I have not heard of in the Ducks system, so it was nice to look him up, and for me, the same thing with Tyler Toit. I didn't know who he was either, so this has all been enlightening to me. Not a lot of buzz around him, not to knock on him either, but he's played last few seasons with the Tri-City Americans in the WHL. Not a giant point guy, especially to Tyler Toit. But what kind of game and what can we expect out of Kyle here? I mean, he's only 19, so obviously some room for growth. But where do you see him in this Ducks organization?
Yeah, I think he was a good pick to have in the 4th round back in 2017. He's more of a two-way guy, and he hasn't really been playing. He hasn't really been playing first-line minutes because he's been on some pretty good Tri-City teams, especially this year. They made a decent run in the playoffs, and I think he battled with injuries this year, only played 36 games. But, he's more of a two-way guy. He still puts up some points, obviously, in his full season before this last one. He had 57 points in 72 games, 20 goals. So, it's not bad in junior. And he was on pace to get around that this year, close to it. And then he really stepped his game up in the playoffs, getting 6 points in 10 games. And he's playing like a second line, third line type of guy in the WHL, and he's still being productive. So that's always nice to see. I'm interested to see if he gets a bigger role with Tri-City next year. He should be going back for his overage season, and will have a bigger role to play on that team, whether it be first line or second line minutes. And if they're going to make another run at a WHL championship, he should be a big part of that. I think that will be interesting to see if he could really step his game up. If he ends up being close to a point per game and the defense doesn't fall off, then I think that will be interesting to see. But as a fourth-round pick, you always hold some promise, and I think we'll get a better idea next year, and then after that, if he makes the jump up to San Diego, what he can really do. But I think he projects more as a winger. He has played center at times with Tri-City, but he's probably more of a winger long-term.
We got another pick here from the Ducks back in 2017, round 3, 91st overall, Jack Bedini. Unsigned, ended up playing for Harvard University last season, 10 goals, 7 assists. He's a centerman, 20 years old. Where does he fit around here? This is another guy that obviously not been in the organization long term, obviously still in college. Is he somebody that we can kind of see to come up in the system? Or are these guys mostly just maybe people, and like we said, nothing wrong with it, to kind of fill out the goal system?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always interesting, the USHL NCAA route, because these guys, the NCAA, you look at it and the guy, he only had 17 points in 33 games. Well, in the NCAA, that's not necessarily that bad. I mean, there's only some special players who can put up a point per game or over a point per game in the NCAA. So you got to take that with a grain of salt and really look at the competition, the guys they're playing against. Some of these guys in the NCAA have played in the CHL before. They've played in other leagues, and now they're going over to college and trying to get an education there while also playing some hockey and maybe getting a last shot at coming over to the NHL. And there are some great prospects and great players in the NCAA. So, the interesting thing for me is I believe he got invited to the selection camp or the trial camp for the World Juniors, which was great to see from him. I mean, he's a third-round pick, and maybe not a guy you would expect with all the talent they have in the U.S. system to really get a shot at going to the World Juniors. Obviously, didn't end up making the team, but for good reason. I mean, the Chicago Steel, I believe, when he was drafted, they had won the championship in the USHL, which always helps the guy's draft stock when you're coming off a championship. So I think that helped him in that case. But still, he's a guy that has some promise. Again, he's more of a two-way guy, but he is a goal scorer. He put up 28 goals in 59 games with Chicago. Then he put up 10 goals and 7 assists with Harvard in the NCAA last year. So for me, again, it's becoming a cliche at this point, but it's what you look for in prospects is some progression and some improvement. So he should be back, I would assume, with Harvard this year coming up, and putting up more points, improving his goal-scoring total as well will be interesting to see if he can continue that development. But as a third-round pick, there's always some promise there, and I think what the Ducks are looking for are some guys who really are goal scorers first. Of course, they've got some coming up in their system. Max Jones is included in that, but Bedini's a goal scorer, and that's what they need. And if he can have another impressive season with Harvard next year, hopefully we can see some continued improvement.
I think that's kind of what you can look at and say the same thing about when you're looking at Brent Gates in the Ducks system. He's a 20-year-old. He's playing for the University of Minnesota in the NCAA. He's somebody that the Ducks have been wanting to see kind of put up more points in NCAA to kind of progress his offense. He's a centerman. He was a 2015 third-rounder, so you can kind of expect if once he turns pro, he's going to go directly into the goal system and make the step from there. But, overall, it's sort of the same expectation, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, again, the NCAA, when you're looking at point totals, he's done pretty well, and he's progressed every year. 7 points in his first year, 21 in 37 games in his second year, and then 26 last year. And again, he's more of a shooter more than anything, but he still does put up the assists. And again, I mean, he's a third-round pick just like Bedini was, and I feel like this is where we kind of could expect Bedini to be a couple of years down the road. I know they're similar age, just Brent has spent a couple more seasons in the NCAA, a similar route where they both came from the USHL. But, I mean, there's still some hope that he can make the jump. And again, it'll be interesting to see when he does get that shot with the goals, if he can transition into pro hockey. And I feel like it's a lot easier to come from the NCAA and transition into the AHL than it is to come out of junior, because you're playing against some older guys and some more experienced guys in the NCAA. So I don't know if he'll be back with the University of Minnesota next year or not, or if he's going to make the jump up to the Gulls. I'd have to refresh myself on the eligibility rules in the NCAA, but he has played 3 seasons there, so I would assume if he's getting a degree, he probably has about 1 more year left with the University of Minnesota. So he's a guy I'll keep my eye on, because the Ducks are in need of centers, and he's a guy who's played center throughout his career in the USHL and the NCAA. So if he can continue, he might be a guy who's like a third-line, fourth-line guy in the NHL if he eventually makes the jump.
And here's a guy, American kid, just to throw it out there, Eddie, as I always like to tease you about.
A lot of them. I love the system.
There is. Jack Kopaka is somebody that I've heard of, somebody I know that is signed by the Ducks, a player that I feel like was just fits the mold for that Bob Murray, Randy Carlyle style of hockey. The physicality in his game is always improving. Right now, he's in the OHL. He's playing for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. So he's a scorer, man. He's got 63 points this last season. He's definitely going to be making his jump to the goals, I feel like, next year. This is somebody the Ducks could probably look to be seasoned in the AHL, maybe get some playing time down the road in the NHL, right? This is kind of like the guy that the Ducks are looking for.
Yeah, and he was playing on, I was going to say a good Sault Ste. Marie team, but they were an amazing Sault Ste. Marie team this year. I think they only lost 8 games in the regular season. They took Hamilton to Game 6 in the OHL Championship, and they actually ended up losing more games in the playoffs than they did in the regular season, which is ridiculous. But he was a big part of that team. Took a huge step forward offensively this year. He's always been a goal scorer. He put up 20 goals in his first season, 30 goals in the second, but he added the assists here, put up another 31 and 63 points, so almost a point per game guy and a very good team. And then he continued that into the playoffs. I mean, he was one of their best players, and there was a time, I think it was in the second and third round of the OHL Championships, where he was just scoring almost every night. He scored some big goals too. He scored an OT winner for them. Ended up having 21 points in 24 games. He's made some big leaps, which is great. I mean, he's a big guy, 6'2", 192. He's more of like a power forward type of guy. But he's still got some decent speed, and he's a guy that kind of goes to the net. You know, you'll hear it on the interview when we talk to Max, how the Ducks always look for those big, fast guys now, that the physical type of guys, the guys that play that fit that mold for the Ducks system. And I feel like he has that, and you know, he's really proved he probably should have been drafted higher than the 4th round back in 2016, because I think he's made some great progression. And again, it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of guys making the jump to San Diego this year, which is very exciting. You've got Sam Steele, you've got Max Jones, Josh Mahura, you've got and now Jack Kopaka as well. I mean, San Diego's getting a huge influx of talent coming into their system, so it'll be interesting to see how all these guys mash together. A lot of them know each other, and there's going to be a lot of talent, a lot of goal scoring heading into San Diego this year.
Yeah, and speaking on that same line, Maxime Comtois is the next guy I'm going to talk about. He's the Ducks' 2017 second-round pick, number 50 overall. He's signed. Speaking of power forward, 19 years old, 6'2", 205 pounds. The dude can score, and he's by all credits around, they're talking about him being a dependable guy in all zones, which is a good thing for the Ducks. But like you were saying, the speed with the skill and the size is just – it's what everyone wants. You can't necessarily just get that. But the Ducks have come around and been able to pick up a few of these guys. So everyone should be excited for Maxime, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's probably the guy that's improved the most since getting drafted. And he was a guy at times who was projected to go as high as like middle first round in 2017. And then at times even late in the first round. But he was a first-round pick for most of the year. But he struggled. I mean, he didn't see that progression in his draft year, and that worried a lot of teams. And of course, that's why he dropped off. But he had such a great rookie season in the QMJHL, almost a point per game, which is tough to do. I mean, it's tough to come into a new league as like a 16-year-old kid and almost go a point per game. So that's why the hype was there. That's why people thought, this is a guy who could be a middle, like a lottery pick almost, essentially. And then he goes into his next season with Victoriaville, and they were still a good team, a playoff team, and his point totals actually went down. The goal scoring wasn't really there. There's a lot of worry that he kind of plateaued and that was it. And then, my goodness, this season was just a coming out party for him. I mean, Victoriaville was a great team. They added one of the better players in the QMJHL, and he just led that team to the playoffs, and they made a deep run too. They ended up getting beat by Antoine Moran's Acadie Bathurst, who are actually in the Memorial Cup right now, but he goes from having 22 goals in 64 games the year before to 44 goals in less games.